Cinema, like all other forms of art, seeks to evoke emotion, and in the same ways paintings and photographs rely on framing and composition to evoke these emotions, so does film. One of the most powerful feelings film can evoke is fear, and it's probably why there are entire genres dedicated to making an audience feel it. But when generating fear, it isn't always that easy. And when it comes to films, audiences need a little priming. What primes an audience for fear, though, is discomfort. It's knowing inherently that something is wrong despite having no possible clue what that could be. And the main way this is done is through proper framing and composition. One of the biggest names in film history to which the creation of discomfort in film can easily be attributed to is Stanley Kubrick. Kubrick has been a huge influence on many famed directors and has been regarded as one of the most influential directors in cinematic history. Kubrick's framing techniques in particular have also gone on to influence entire genres that focus on generating fear, like some types of science fiction, mystery thrillers, and most importantly, horror. While most of Kubrick's films successfully generate discomfort, he tends to follow a recipe of constant startling symmetry and point perspective, often combined with upbeat classical music to facilitate an eerie feeling of something being off. While several of his films would be great examples, Kubrick's 1980 film, The Shining, is a horror film that perfectly primes the audience for fear through his constant and unrelenting use of point perspective and symmetry. The Shining is drenched almost entirely in point perspective and symmetrical composition. One of the most iconic uses of this, not only in this film, but throughout all of film history, is Danny's tricycle ride. Kubrick's use of symmetry throughout the entire shot and his constant use of mirroring are unnatural and fundamentally disturbing enough that a sense of mounting tension is easily generated from it. While symmetry ends up an actual motif in this film, it is the usage of symmetrical mirroring in cases like the hotel's hallways, where the mirroring is unnatural and architecturally speaking, impossible, that helps to further disturb the audience, and do so just enough that the audience is essentially creeped out enough to know something is wrong, just not what is. The Shining, with its genius framing techniques, is a film that would later go on to influence other horror films, two being the next films in line to be discussed: Martin Scorsese's 2010 film Shutter Island and Jordan Peele's 2017 film Get Out. While Martin Scorsese's film Shutter Island is one that deals with themes and motifs similar to Kubrick's The Shining, mazes, sanity, and isolation to name a few, like several of Kubrick's other films, the storyline and plot lose out to the cinematography. Scorsese's Shutter Island is a film so heavily coded in tension, some critics would say that's all there is to it. And while the storyline might not compete with the cinematography, the framing and composition at least do generate the tension and discomfort Scorsese seems to be aiming for in this film. One of the scenes in Shutter Island that automatically generates tension and discomfort, and is also clearly influenced by Danny's tricycle ride in The Shining, is Teddy and Chuck's characters arriving at Ashcliff. The way this shot is composed from the gate first being seen to once they make it inside is entirely in point perspective, and this usage of point perspective seems to establish a sense of things being wrong right off the bat. There is an eerie sense of calmness in the air that rubs you the wrong way and comes off as unnatural. While Scorsese doesn't bombard his audience with symmetry and point perspective as much as Kubrick does, there are several scenes and shots throughout the film that incorporate these framing techniques and clearly display Kubrick's influence on Scorsese as a director. Jordan Peele's 2017 film Get Out, despite dealing with completely different themes, slavery, fetishization of the black body, and a post-racial America to name a few, still draws heavily on the framing and compositional styles associated with generating discomfort that were first established in Stanley Kubrick films. Get Out might not employ point perspective and symmetrical compositions to the point of symmetry becoming a motif, but it is one of the first things you see upon the film opening. Get Out's opening scene is shot in point perspective and follows a character you later learn to be Andrew walking down a darkened sidewalk. The first couple of frames are just the sidewalk and the camera backtracking until Andrew enters the shot. This shot immediately, from the minute you see the sidewalk, seems to be off. There is something wrong, and like in The Shining, the sense of something being off usually establishes a feeling of foreboding, or that something bad is about to happen. Though in contrast to Kubrick, Peele does not use a classical piece of music to set an eerie tone, instead using no music, which for this shot leaves an emptiness that's almost haunting. There are still several cases of symmetry and point perspective throughout this film. One of my favorites being when Chris wakes up trapped. That shot is set up to be perfectly symmetrical to the point of being creepy, and while you should already fear for Chris, that sense of foreboding worsens. It's in shots like these that Kubrick's influence can easily be seen. All in all, it's clear the effects of framing and composition are far and wide when attempting to generate emotion, and that Kubrick's introduction of point perspective and symmetry in composition have come a long way in generating discomfort in film.